Let's close this rear suicide door and fire up the rotary engine. Oh yeah. So the Mazda RX-8, already it's a winner in my book because it's different, and different is the answer when it comes to cars for me. They don't necessarily have to be the very best automobile ever made, they just need to be special, interesting and different. And the RX-8 has that in absolute spades. So the RX-8 came out in 2003 and it is in the long line of Mazda RX cars, right from, well, originally the R100, then the RX-2, 3, 4, 5, missed the 6 out, then you had the RX-7 for multiple generations, and then finally this, the RX-8. And its design, which is essentially a 4-door coupe, pillarless. As you know, I love a pillarless car if you've watched any of my videos. With the front edge of the rear door, the suicide door, which opens backwards, acting as the middle pillar. And you might think, oh, well, there's no real pillar, so this car, it's not going to be stiff, it's not going to be rigid. Well, it is. The most rigid and stiff car of its day, which translates into better handling characteristics. It's low down. When you get in the car, the sills are really sort of deep and thick, and you have to like lower yourself in, and when you get out, this is something, if you're a little bit more advanced in your years, shall we say, you need to consider that it might be a tricky car to get in and out of. And it has a 1.3 litre engine. I say that in quotes, that's what Mazda calls it, a 1.3 litre Wankel rotary engine. I don't know, you have to put an accent on when you say Wankel, because you could say Wankel, but then. So do away with all your pistons and instead have this little sort of triangular shaped rotor. You can see in the shape of the seat behind me, because there's little triangular shaped things everywhere in this car, that spins round at a ridiculous speed and propels this car forward with at least 190 horsepower, up to 231 in some models. Oh yeah, boy! It starts coming in at about 4,000, but it doesn't really sort of pick up its pace until 5, and then it just accelerates all the way to the red line, like it absolutely loves it. Oh! Like it wants to be revved. That's the whole point of this engine, and you don't feel as guilty doing it as you would a normal piston engine, where the puff runs out in a normal piston engine usually at 6,000, something like that, or even less. In this car, it just keeps on going. Now, you might be able to detect that this car does have a louder exhaust on it. They're not normally this loud. It does add to the drama. Now, this car is the 192, but it has apparently a street port on it. Now, I don't know what power that gives it, but it's more than 192 and probably less than 231. But it has a 7,500 RPM rev limit, and it just really wants to go all the way to it every time. It could go up to 9,000 in the 231 model. There's no torque lowdown, as famously it's kind of known for. When you kind of driving around normally, when you want to pull away in this car, you do have to give it a little bit more revs than you would a normal car. I love how the RX-8 looks. It's not as pretty as the RX-7 that came before it, because that really was a stunning looking car, but it's very purposeful looking, very mechanical and Japanese and different. When you look at it directly from the front, low down, it looks really cool, because difference in the sort of lower half of the car to the upper half, which is very narrow, and then you've got this big wide sporty lower half, it looks almost supercar-like from that angle. The interior is nice. It's got a weird sort of central circular design to this center console, which looks like a big CD. And I don't know whether that was because at the time CDs were still a cool thing and they wanted to make it look like one. Now that's such old hat that probably most people looking at it wouldn't even think of a CD when they saw it, whereas that's what I always used to think when I did. They've got this little screen here with all sort of red text on it. Red light is really good actually, especially at night time. The dials in front, they're really cool. They're like, you get 3 dials and they're cowled, deeply cowled. And the speed, which is a digital readout, is in italics because the car is sporty and forward looking and forward facing. I love the door handles. They feel, I think they're actually metal because they're cold to touch. People at the time, journalists and stuff, they would complain about the hard plastics in this car, and yes, they are very sort of cheap feeling hard plastics, but I think Mazda, knowing that they had to build a car with all that clever engineering and stuff, they needed to make some decisions on cost cutting somewhere, because otherwise this car would end up being like too expensive. You wouldn't buy a Mazda if it was the same price as a Porsche, would you? You'd buy a Porsche, or at least that's probably what their marketing team thought. There's lots of little cubby holes, there's a decent sized glove box, you've got cup holders, you've got this armrest in the middle that opens up and gives in 2 different places. You've got a little tiny cubby hole on the right hand side of the steering wheel, which you could fit, you know, a couple of Werther's originals in. Got door pockets. It's got a decent sized boot. You know, the boot's the same size as a Vauxhall Corsa. It's a proper 4-seater car, so we'll find out what it's like in the back. What do you think, pal? Legroom, sat behind JJ at 6 foot, it's tight. My legs are around the sides, but you could easily get kids back here, and the headroom's good enough for adults as well, so it's pretty decent. I really like the back of this car. You've got this like central console that runs all the way from the back right up to the front, almost like a concept car in its design. The windows open kind of like little flaps like that. That's all I get, a little bit of air. And of course it's got suicide doors, and I've always thought that's a funny name for something, suicide. It doesn't fill you with confidence, does it? But basically it's because in the olden times, the door, if it got blown open by the wind, which it would instead of being blown shut, you would have to lean out of the car to grab the door and shut it. And at that point you would fall out and die. You would fall out and commit suicide. You have to open the front door first, and then you can open the back door. So I am not allowed to get out until JJ's gotten out. And you can't obviously shut the back door onto the front door when it's closed. But yeah, very comfortable leather seats, and for a sports car, it's probably the most spacious sports car I've ever been in the back of, that's for sure. Yeah, cheers, pal. So Mazda were really keen to build a proper sports car with the RX-8. It's a 50-50 weight distributed rear wheel drive. The engine is behind the front axle, so it's front to mid engine, and it's got a limited slip differential and stiffer in the body and chassis than a Porsche 911 of that time. It's got multi-link rear suspension, and it handles like an absolute dream. When you get into a corner in this car and you turn in, resists you. It actually gets slightly heavier, and you can sort of really easily position the car around the corner, and it gives you that feeling that you are truly in control of the car, thanks to its rotary engine. Now you might think, well, couldn't they just put a piston engine in it? You know, if they put a V6 in it, it would have been heavy, and it would have spoiled that 50-50 weight distribution, because it's a very light engine, the rotary engine. Absolute kudos to Mazda engineers for sticking to what they wanted to do. I mean, even just this gearbox, which is like out of an MX-5, it's just really nice. It's short throw, notchy in a good way. So it's an absolutely fabulous handling car with brilliant performance characteristics. So what gives? Why are they for sale for £6,000 or so? Which has actually gone up since they used to be. When I last was looking at these cars, you could buy a good one for like 2 or 3 grand. The rotary engine, for all its positives, does have a fair few considerable negative. That is in the day-to-day affordability and running costs and the reliability. Unfortunately, these engines, they need to be looked after more than your average piston engine. This car is designed to burn a litre of oil every 1,000 miles. Basically, with the rotary engine, you need to look after the rotor tips. If you think of the sort of triangular shaped rotor, on each corner of the triangle is a little tip, and that is what seals the edge of the engine block against the rotor. And if that wears out, then you lose compression, just like you would if the piston rings. Think of it as like a piston ring in a piston engine. You need to check that the engine starts both cold and hot, because the rotary engine, when it starts to wear out, when those tips start to wear out, that's how you'll know. Now, funnily enough, all the adverts on Auto Trader that I saw, everybody has a compression test done on the car, and they can sort of like try and promise you when you buy the car that it's got a decent compression. Now, how many cars, when you're buying them, do they come with a sort of disclaimer that the engine is healthy? Because it's kind of normally assumed, isn't it? But not with the RX-8. But the good news is the engines can be rebuilt for sort of £3,000 kind of money by proper specialists who know what they're doing, and you'll end up with basically a new engine after that. I think 3,000 is a pretty reasonable amount. If you buy one of these cars and the rest of it's okay, then the worst that can happen is you need to spend 3 grand on an engine rebuild. The other thing to look out for if you're buying an RX-8 is rust, and they do like to rust. Like all Mazdas of that time, they are a little bit rotty. The rear arches, the sills, and you see it on places like the boot lid around the rear brake light quite often. This car's not too bad, although it is starting to go on the rear arches. We're now in the RX-8's natural home, which is the petrol station, because if you're lucky, you're going to average 20 mpg with this car. It's obviously not an efficient vehicle. In addition to the fuel costs, in the UK, this car is very expensive to tax. It's the top tax bracket, so you're talking £700 plus a year to tax it. If you get an earlier car, pre-2006, you can get away with £400 a year, but it's by no means cheap. just the right bit of road on the right day in this car, and it's all forgiven. But it's the combination of that sound of the engine, the revs, the sensations that you get from that, the feeling that it just wants to go, that it wants to be driven hard, the sort of very sensitive throttle, which makes it easy to just absolutely blast away when your revs are high, the brakes, which are also quite sensitive and very effective. And it's absolutely planted. It's just absolutely planted. The power, you know, it feeds in linearly, and it's just so much fun to drive. The target audience of this car has changed massively over the years. From when it was first released and it was sold as a sort of like sensible sports car with 4 seats and a car that you could use every day. And then over time, with the reliability issues of the engine and the fuel economy, as people started to realise what was really involved in owning one of these cars, it became more of an enthusiast car, a car that you would take out on the weekends. As a prospect now in 2025, it is a fantastic car to have fun with, and one that has no real rivals in its bracket. Anyways, if you want to see your car on the channel, please do get in touch at this email. And yeah, bye.